professors, excellencies. We have Excellency Ambassador Gwang here and Ambassador Mugoya and others. Your worships, land friends and other friends. Yes, Dr. Mawano, I heard your laugh. Distinguished guests. And there's a prince here. I think there is one prince only. When he comes, we will see him. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Thank you very much for coming. I would like to thank my family. My wife has been introduced. The children are ushering. My editor, actually her real name, long name is Ariane Tunjisa, or Titi. Let's give her a round of applause. The cover design was by my Muko, Arnold Birunji, commonly known as Junior. If you can stand up. That cover design is by Arnold Birunji. Graphic design, Edward Merrick Matovu, where are you? Please stand up for recognition, Mr. Matovu there. The printer, Liz Sentamo from Word of Hope Printers. She lost her voice, she could not be here. Events people, led by Monica Kairu, you have seen her. Where are you, Monica Kairu? She's where I think she's now counting the meal cards to ensure that the hotel and all of you, thank you very much for coming and staying up to this time. Give yourselves a hand clap, please. Briefly about the book. I wrote the first book and I made the mistake of writing at the end of the first book that I would soon write a second book. So some people read everything in the book and they kept saying, you promised us, you promised us. So we started on something with Ariantu, wrote a few things, then later she said, but there's so much death, why don't you write about grief? Because there is not much written on grief. And Ariantu there, when she says something, I take her very seriously. So we started writing something on grief. And then through the beginning of writing, people kept dying. My dad died, my niece Doreen died, and so then Jasopio, Jasarach, Jaskakuru. And then just when I thought the book was done, then my mom died. She was not supposed to be part of the book. It was supposed to have been published earlier. But she also died. So Mulangira has come in. Mulangira, please stand up for recognition from the Ankole Kingdom. Nasan Tandekwire, and many of you know I play tennis. He's my partner. And actually one of the major reasons I play tennis, how many of you can play with the prince on the same side? So, who wins? That is, and at the same table is Dr. Silva Bahendeka. Please, thank you very much for coming. He doesn't go for parties or anything. So this is a special thing. He's my doctor, but he was also Mommy's doctor. And Mommy never enjoyed doctors, but when you told him he was going to see Dr. Silva, he would say, can we go now? Because they would engage in this discussion, and I think the other patients would be, why is that woman taking so long? They just clicked. So Dr. Bahendeka, Doctors Plaza, thank you for coming. So the title of the book, Why Leaders, and Justice Makumbi talked about next of kin. You know, in succession, next of kin is an admirable word. But when you're in a hospital, actually, and they say you are next of kin, don't celebrate. It is not a good thing. It is a lot of responsibility. So at Mami, they said, oh, you have to sign here because you are the next of kin. And so next of kin, they have to take this decision. And of course, I also became the heir of my dad when he died. So all of you are leaders, because at one point you are called upon to stand in that gap. You don't prepare to be a leader. If you are a firstborn, if you are in charge of the funeral. So it dawned on me that in all these deaths, I was called upon to be the leader. And that's why I talked about leaders. And why do we grieve? Of course, the physical absence, we lose the company, the irreversibility of death and finality of this, and the silence of death, no answers, and the powerlessness of it is partly why we grieve. Of course, I look at grieving then and now. They asked about when were you first aware of death. My grandma, Jaja Manjeri Naigaga, who was my dad's mother, she used to call me her husband because I was named after her husband. And at that time I was wondering why an old woman is calling me husband. But she died and I became aware. And so I noted many things. I was about 10 years, but I noted many things. So recently when these people were all dying, I realized death and mourning and grieving had changed so much. So that's one of the things I write about in the book, what grieving was then and what it is now and what happened. And about grieving last, David Sepuya lost his mother and his dad, and we were there for him. And when I lost my dad, he told me that, have you stopped to grieve? I saw you were very busy. And I said, I don't need to stop to grieve. Life has to go on. And then he said, no, you have to find time to grieve. So I thought about that and I realized, so you grieve last because you must attend to the mourners, you must consult the bishop, you must consult the clan. You know, even at the death, people bring up so many unserious things. And you have to arbitrate this. I don't know if that has been your experience. My friend Colin Kaviswa, when they lost their dad, and I think he's the heir, he told us a story. The clan came because his father was a Wolunyiriri, and hey, we need 10 bulls, and so on. So he had just come from America. I didn't ask for his permission to say this, but so he said, okay, so how much are you contributing to this? And they said, Omwana tuvumye chichi, and they walked away one by one. But so he said, okay, if you can't contribute, here is my budget, 1 bull, and so on, and that's what I can manage. So the present day. And then I write about, really death is spiritual. At the end of the day, it is spiritual, either way you want to look at it. And you realize that there are 2 forces striving, spiritual forces. Of course, there is the issue of witchcraft. Many of our neighbors, neighboring tribes, I think, practice this thing. I think the Basoga, the Bagisu, and the Bagwere, so, and the Jopadola. But they like to say we are the ones, so I put the record straight tonight. So, because I was with Mom in hospital for about a month and we had a medical report, I thought finally nobody will allege witchcraft. So 2 months, my nephew who is here is called Nelly, who grew up with Mommy and all, calls me and says they have said he was the one who had bewitched. And I realized it's difficult to run away from this thing. So in the book, I discuss the issue of witchcraft from mainly 3 different angles. Of course, you know that we have the Witchcraft Act, which was really enacted by the British. Mr. and Mrs. Boston are here from the UK. So it means the British, when they came here, noticed that there was something they could not understand. And they recognized and acknowledged it. So for those of you who don't think Witchcraft Act exists, the British actually came here and realized there was something, and they enacted a law called the Witchcraft Act. Of course, then there's a spiritual bit of it, which I talk about. You know, my uncle Munulo was renowned to be a rainmaker, and whenever drought would come, the people would come for him, beat him up, and say, if you don't bring rain, and so on. So, but that in a nutshell is really what the book is about. I thank you very much for having turned up in big numbers. And yeah, death is a heavy subject, and I thank the panelists. Please let's give them a hand clap for being able to deal with the subject. I want us to listen to the guest of honor. Can we put our hands together and welcome our guest of honor? Dr. Professor Ezra Sabiti Suruma.
Thank you so very much, my brother, if I may, Justice Mike Chivita, for your kind words and introduction. Brethren, a request to ride on Justice Mike Chivita's protocol. I feel safer doing that. And simply recognize you as brethren on the second day of this month. I preached a sermon, and the title of it was from the first letter of Peter, chapter 2, verse 11, and it says, brethren, this is in the Living Bible, brethren, we are only visitors here. That covers all of us. Whether you are a member of parliament, Chief Justice, professor, whatever, I want to cover you in this introduction or protocol as a brother and sister. And go on to say that I received the invitation to this book launch in August when I was in Kabale preparing for the East African Revival celebrations. I had no idea why Justice Chibita thought I would be a good guest, but I immediately accepted the invitation. I had no idea what was going to follow. We did go through the East African Revival celebrations. It was a wonderful 5 days in Kabale. I had been asking all along, what is revival? What is revival? And no one could give me a satisfactory answer until I saw for myself revival taking place, and reminded me of our study of Revelation, in which John has a vision of heaven and he sees hundreds of millions of people singing and worshiping without end. I was very, very greatly revived. I did not know that I would soon be called to return. I was staying in Kabale more than that because we are working on a prayer mountain on one of the most wonderful views in the world, the glory of God. Then I received a message that my nephew, whom I have looked after for Since his dad, my youngest brother, died 28 years ago, he's one of the four that I've been looking at, that had become unconscious and was admitted to hospital. I called Dr. Silva Vahendeka, who had been helping us in looking after him, and they arranged for him to be taken to intensive care in Zambia. And I came and I found him there. And he remained in coma the first week, second week, third week. We moved him to another hospital. He remained in coma. To cut a long story short, after 6 weeks, he passed on. That was 4 days after I had been preaching this sermon, that we are only visitors here, that we are in exile. Another version of the Bible, the Amplified Bible, says we are exiles. And so we went back to Kabale for burial. And I was wondering if I should cancel this launch in view of what we are going through. But somehow I felt reluctant to cancel this invitation. On Monday or Sunday, I had the courage to start reading the book. So for 3 days I was reading it as we were grieving, because we buried on Saturday. And I went through it on Tuesday night. Then I went to bed. Each day was heavy. Each day of grieving was heavy. I was reading the book. I could identify clearly with what Justice Chivita has written. Indeed, I was amazed that he could write about so many people in so much detail. I said, this is a rare gift that this man has. And I read through the book. And the morning, Wednesday, I decided, we had agreed that Wednesday morning we have to come back because the launch is today. Yesterday morning, I woke up and went down on my mat to pray. I felt very, very heavy. It was as if I had thought the grief had gone away. But for some reason, it was heavier than before. And I wondered if I could travel. So I went down to pray. I lay down on the mat and prayed and prayed. Many scriptures came, but they didn't seem to comfort me. The burden remained very heavy. And then, at some point, must have been after about 2 hours, something happened. First, I remembered Romans 12:1, that I must sacrifice the body. And as I was still asking how I sacrifice the body, another scripture came, Galatians 2:20, that I have been crucified with Christ, and I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. Brethren, I don't know what happened. Mike has just said that death is spiritual. What happened to me was that I got a transformative impact that said that you are living physically. And yet, you claim to be a Christian. That you must stop living in the body, living physically, and become spiritual. That you must, and somehow I saw clearly that all my thinking and worrying and grieving was on my body and my fear for my body and my fear over bodies, and nothing spiritual was going through me, only the worry about the pain and the body and this and that. And the message was, indeed, as Paul said, I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. And life I live by faith or by trust. Another version, in the Son of God. And so, from that moment on, I became changed. I became changed. My outlook, my attitude, I became changed. And I felt that I had to share what had happened to me with someone. When I went to breakfast table, the sister of the young man who had died joined me, and I told her what had happened to me. And as I was speaking to her, I remembered what happened to me in 1997 when her dad, the dad of these children that I've been looking after, died. He was deteriorating every day that I went to see him. And one Saturday morning, before going to see him, I stood in my bedroom and prayed. I said, Lord, this is more than I can bear. Help me. And I went to the bathroom, and there happened to be a study Bible that a friend in America had given me. And I opened it, and I opened John 5:24, and it said, whoever hears and believes him who sent me has eternal life. He's no longer condemned. He has crossed from death to life. And I said, that transformed me and took me through the death of my youngest brother. And I was preaching in all the places that we went, here in Kampala and in Kachireri in the village. I was preaching on my brother's funeral. And at home, when we were about to bury him, and I preached, my father, who was a catechist, had taught for more than 30 years in various churches in our part of the country, burst into a song. And I remembered a man's youngest son is being buried. Imagine if it were you. And he burst out into a song of victory. He said, I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back, no turning back. This memory came back. This is back in 1997. That memory came back. And I remembered the main message, what happened to me when my youngest brother was dying, was that statement, crossing from death to life. And I felt that the Lord has arranged that I be here today because I need to share this message with you. Yes, I've been saved since 1960. Some of you were not yet born. But in 1997, it was as if I became born again. And now, in 2025, yesterday morning, I felt as if I had become born again and felt a sense of regret that I acted as if I had forgotten that I'm born again, that I am spiritual. I'm a spiritual person, not a physical person. And I must live as a spiritual person. I said, what is the sense of saying you are born again if all your effort, all your concerns are physical? I say this because I know that all of us, at least most of us, I'm sure, are thinking physically. We are thinking about the money, we are thinking about the clothing, we are thinking about the bed sheets, thinking about the shoes. These are the things that are preoccupying our life, what you call life. And Mike has really done a wonderful job of pointing out the limits of life. The limits of life. And if we don't get out of those limits, we think we are living, but just suffering, as my brother pointed out. But I believe that this message in Galatians 2:20, that I have been sacrificed with Christ. So, Jesus said, take up your cross and follow me. And of course, you'll be sacrificed on that cross. And then you're born again, and you're a spiritual being. You are no longer a physical being. My prayer, as I say, thank you, Just Chibita, for writing this book. My prayer is that your life will not be the same. When these words become real to you, that you are not just a physical person, you are a spiritual person, and spirituality in its entirety, from head to foot, you are spiritual. Don't concentrate on bread and butter. Concentrate on eternal life. So, leaders, of course, grieve. Mike says they grieve last, but they don't grieve least. They grieve, I think, as much as everybody else. And my second message on this subject, we were in Jerusalem about 10 years ago, 10 or 12 years ago, and Myles Monroe said something that I have repeated many times. So you pardon me if you have heard it before. He said, if you have nothing to die for, you have nothing to live for. If you have nothing to die for, you have nothing to live for. That statement disturbed me so much. I kept meditating over it. I never found an answer to what it meant. Until recently, and this agrees, I think one of your quotations in your book is from Romans 8:35 and 39. But in between there is 8:36. Which in the Living Bible says, for his sake, that's for God's sake, we must be ready to face death at every moment of the day. We are like sheep awaiting slaughter. This statement disturbed me. I said, how can you be ready to die at every moment of the day? Every moment of the day. Is it possible? And when he said you are like sheep awaiting slaughter, that made it even worse. Because the threat is so big, so strong. But I left out the first two words, which are for God, three words which are for his sake, for God's sake. And it was the answer to what Myles Monroe said about what are you living for? And in this book, I feel that the question keeps coming. What are you living for? What is life for? So, it's for God's sake. If you are living for God's sake, you are prepared. You are ready. Because you are doing what your Creator has put you in the world to do. If you are doing what your Creator has put you here to do, any moment you die, it doesn't really matter when you die. Because you are dying doing what you're supposed to be doing, and you'll be received with the words, well done, my good and faithful servant. So, I don't feel that I have to worry about death. When it comes, it will come, as Mike makes it very clear. It's an inevitability. But what is important is, what have you died for? For land, fighting over land, fighting over mortgage, buildings, fighting over bank accounts. What have you died for? You don't know when you will die. But the question is, what are you dying for? And I think Romans 8:36 is saying, for God's sake, die for God's sake. Die doing what God has put you here to do, and then you'll be at peace with him when you leave. Because clearly, death is coming. I'm not saying threaten you, I'm just quoting. So the book ends with a song that we sang earlier, Lord, our help in ages past. But before that, in the epilogue, Mike is talking about hope. Now, hope, of course, is we have to go on, but it's not simple. It's not easy. But I believe that our God, is able to give us the strength to go on. And I believe that the message that he gave me yesterday morning, the message of transformation, so that I live as a spiritual rather than a physical being, is a take-home for all of us. Mike said death is spiritual. I would add, Mike, that life is spiritual. Perhaps more, even more. Life is spiritual. And if death comes when you are spiritual, death is just the body that dies. Your spirit lives eternally. With these few words, I'd like to congratulate Justice Chibita for the courage to write about this topic. Most of us don't even want to hear about it. It is too uncomfortable. But he has taken pen and paper and written all these 12 chapters consistently and clearly, and pointed out so many examples of what he has been through. It's unbelievable, the number of cases that he cites and describes so clearly. I felt so small that I have lost about as many brothers and sisters as you have, but I'm not sure I'm able to put it all on paper as you have. I thank God for the gift that he has given you. And of course, as I conclude, we are all here to use the gifts that God gives us. Fruitfulness. And I believe that writing this book is evidence of fruitfulness on your part. And I believe that our Lord will reward you for being fruitful, Because he promises if you are fruitful, he lets you continue to be even more fruitful. But if you are not fruitful, he cuts you off. So don't be surprised if you are cut off one of these days because you are not fruitful. So Michael Chibita, thank you for being fruitful. I encourage everyone to read the book. I found it extremely helpful and very insightful. And I thank you for inviting me to be here. And I thank God for the timing that he enabled me to read the book at a time when I was going through grieving. And this grieving has had a transformative impact on my life, even after more than 50 years of being a saved person. The Lord bless you, and thank you very much for the opportunity to be here.